write when the moon is waxing, and edit when the moon is waning. So that's the idea that sparked this moon phase writing challenge. My name's Jules, I'm the Dawdling writer, and welcome to my channel. Today we are talking about the Moon Phase Writing Challenge for October 2020. Also, I'm going to be using this as a Preptober writing challenge to kind of help me get my ducks in a row for the nano that is coming up. The write when the moon is waxing and edit when the moon is waning was some advice to me from my friend Erin, who runs learnedhorology.com. And she had told me this a while ago, but she sort of reiterated this recently to me. And I took her introduction to timing class, where we talked about the wheel of the year and how the seasons and elements, astrology, tarot, and even the moon phases can help you connect with your intentions and with your creativity or spiritual side. And so I was intrigued by the idea, and so I took copious notes, like pages and pages of notes, during her class, and then kind of thinking about it afterwards. And so I've pieced together, I think, a workable plan for October. And so aside from her idea of when to write versus when to edit, I've come up with this based on her suggestions of the timing of things and what the moon phases are supposed to help with or indicate in personalities. I've created this Preptober guide. Hopefully this will help with the month-long planning extravaganza leading up to Nano. And this October 2020 is a perfect time to try this experiment because the 1st of the month and the 31st of the month are both full moons. So we have a full harvest moon on the 1st and a blue moon on the 31st. And so I was excited to see that. And I was like, why not? Let's do it. So here it is. I'm going to throw some words at you for what the particular moon phases are. And so here's a diagram. So the full moon is when the entirety of the face of the moon is visible. We all recognize this. It's the big glowing circle in the middle of the night sky. The waning gibbous is also known as the disseminating moon. And this is the period when the shadow begins to cover the right side of the moon until it is until the right side of the moon, the right half of the moon, is in shadow. And so the last or the third quarter is that date when the right half of the moon is in shadow. The waning crescent is also known as the balsamic or the dark moon phase. And this is the period when the shadow creeps over past that halfway mark and covers the left-hand side of the moon. And so the new moon is when the entirety of the face of the moon is no longer visible. It is entirely in shadow. The waxing crescent is then when the face of the moon begins to peek back out over on the right side until the right half of the moon is visible. And so the first quarter is when that right half is fully visible. The waxing gibbous is the period when the left-hand side of the moon becomes visible again. And so then we go back to the full moon with the entirety of the face being visible. So one thing to note is that the full, new, and quarter moons can be considered as the date that is stated, as well as the day before and the day after. So you have a 3-day window in which you can choose to accomplish the particular writing tasks or writing focuses that we talk about during this video, instead of just a single day. So that makes it a little bit easier to get all of the things checked off the list. So if you want to try this experiment without the Preptober premise, just keep in mind that waxing is when you are adding things to your story. So this could be drafting, planning, outlining, when you're adding scenes, information, details, building characters, and even world building. So that's all when waxing phases, you're growing your story. Whereas the waning phases of the moon, the shrinking side or the shadowed side of the moon, you are thinking about what you're taking away from the story. What would you like to eliminate or cut from your writing? So this should be when you are editing, when you are deleting clutch phrases, when you're removing excess information, details, scenes, even killing off some characters, when you're eliminating plot holes, things like that. So October 1st is a full moon, as is Halloween. In addition to the drafting, planning, and adding to your story, you should be focusing on developing characters that are going to live very full lives. So very developed characters, dynamic characters who are going to go through a lot of things. So with that, you want to add notes or plans for a plethora of experiences, events, situations that they get into, other people that they're going to be meeting. So you need to basically outline the full growth cycle of your characters from when you have them initially born into your brain and then what they should become eventually. You should be building relationships, and this does not necessarily mean just lovey-dovey romantic relationships. This means antagonistic relationships. This means familial, platonic, and of course the romantic as well. So what are the relationships between your characters? This could also be relationships between factions. So if you have different groups or organizations who are searching for power, how do those clash? How do they work hand in hand? Who else are they backstabbing? That kind of thing. And also with world building. If you are looking at the moon phases as a wheel, then they each have a directional association. So the full moon is associated with the south. So when you are world building and you are developing your maps, you may want to be looking at the southern direction for your settings. So that is the full moon, which happens on the 1st and 31st of October. October 2nd through the 9th is the waning gibbous or the disseminating moon. So as the waning phases, you should be editing, deleting clutch phases, removing excess information, considering what characters you want to get rid of, who you want to kill off, things like that. So, but in addition to that, when you are writing under the disseminating moon, you should be focusing on characters who are using their gifts to benefit the community. You should be thinking about unconventional philosophies and actions that get things done or change the way that things are looked at, changing of perspectives. You should be developing teachers, preachers, and mentor characters. You should be looking at how information spreads in your world. So does it spread by word of mouth? Are there newspapers? How does the information spread? How is the information disseminated to the people in your world? And also when you are world building, you should be focused on the southwestern direction of your setting. So that is for October 2nd through 9th. On October 10th is the third or the last quarter. So this is when the right hand side of the moon is in shadow. And this still falls under the waning moon phases, so you should continue to think of things that you would like to remove or keep out of your writing. But when you are writing under the third or last quarter, you should focus on characters questioning and sort of trying to figure out what the meaning and the purpose of the events are. Why is this happening? How did this happen to me? How does this happen to other people? You need to be exploring your characters' motives. Why are they doing the things they do? Why do they take the actions that they are planning to take? You need to be developing an interesting midpoint, whether or not this is a midlife stage in your character's life or whether this is the actual midpoint of your story. You need to be working on developing the midpoint. You need to be combining your character's instinctive actions with their creative thoughts. So create interesting solutions to the problems. You should also be including sudden shifts. So this is when a character may cut ties with a group, or may have a change in mindset after being enlightened or being given a certain chunk of information. Something changes. So they're going to have to shift directions and try something new. And when you are world building, you need to be focusing on the western direction of your setting. So that is all for October 10th. And remember, with the full, new, and quarter moons, you can have that 3-day window rather than just the single day. So you may be looking at the 9th through the 11th for that quarter moon. The 11th through the 15th falls under the waning crescent, which is also known as the balsamic or the dark moon. So in addition to thinking about still the waning phase tasks, you should also be focusing on completion and closure, whether or not this is of your relationships, of subplots, of your main plot. You need to be thinking about how to end things. This could also mean the end of short relationships, or how do characters say goodbye to one another in certain situations. If you are killing off a character, or if they are splitting up, how do they say goodbye? You also need to be developing your character's spirituality and their connection to greater forces, whether or not you have deities or science or magic. How do your characters connect with those forces? You need to be focused on the big questions and your story themes, your overall big questions, big ideas. Make sure that all of the development that you are doing still fits within those frameworks. You need to be creating scenes where your characters will see an eventual success rather than an immediate success. You might consider depicting quiet but resilient characters, as those are usually your sort of elders who have advice but continue to persevere through their own problems. And when you are world building, you need to focus on the northwestern direction of your setting. So that is all for the 11th through 15th under the waning crescent. The next phase is for October 16th. It's the new moon. So this is when the entirety of the face of the moon is in shadow. On the new moon, you should be setting intentions for the new waxing phases. You may want to create a list of what you want to start adding to your writing, or things that you intend for your story to gain. And so when writing under the new moon, you should focus on your character's innocence and sort of their childlike reactions to something new. And you should focus on the beginnings, since it is a new moon. So this might be the beginnings of a new relationship, the beginnings of events or situations or schemes. You may want to consider outlining the prologue, your first act, your first beat, your first chapters or scenes, or focusing on your first line, the very first part of something. And it's what hooks your readers. And so you want to make sure that that is strong. Also, under the new moon, you should be planning out your character's actions that are instinctive, that have very little forethought for consequences. So what are the impulsive decisions that they might be making that will lead them to a new situation, whether or not that is, falling into some sort of trouble that they will then have to work their way out of. That's up to you, but they should be acting on instinct like a child. When you are world building under the new moon, you should be focused on the northern direction of your setting. October 17th through the 27th is the waxing crescent moon. And so as the waxing phase, you should be continuing to draft, plan, outline, and add to your story. But you should also be focusing on developing a full cast of characters and their own developmental arcs. So do you have all of the characters that you need to your main character, your antagonist, your secondary characters, your male and female, your gender non-conforming characters, if you include these. So do you have your human and non-human? What kind of characters are needed for the full breadth of your story? Do you have them all? If not, you need to work on that. You also need to be working on the plot and scene sequence and development. Do you have all of your plot ideas in a row? Do you have them in the correct order that makes sense when you read it? You also need to have your characters, rather than just the bare instinct that we had under the new moon, your characters then begin to develop a little bit more forethought, a little bit more consideration for consequences, likely because of the trouble they fell into under the new moon. And so you need to also develop your characters' goals. Your characters should now be acting with a goal in mind. And when you are world building, focus on the northeastern direction of your setting. The 23rd of October is the first quarter moon. So this is when the right half of the moon is visible. And this is still under the waxing phase. So again, you are adding and gaining things for your story. So you should be focused on your characters' passions and the things that build their confidence. You should be considering what risks your characters are going to be taking. You need to develop the characters who are leaders, or situations that will build leadership qualities in your main characters. You will need to develop characters in events that are hard to stop. Things that are going to wrap your characters up in them, and like your characters can't let go. The plot is gonna move. So you need to make sure that you have those kind of situations in your plot. You also may want to consider adding situations where your character is going to need to manage their anger. And when world building, you need to focus on the eastern direction of your setting. October 24th through the 30th is the waxing gibbous. And this is, again, waxing, so still thinking of things that you need to add to your story. You need to make sure that your characters have learned a lesson or are learning a lesson. And if it's appropriate to your story, you may want to consider building or planning an academic setting, especially for YA. There is always some sort of learning curve and usually some sort of learning setting, whether that is a full-on academy or school or maybe a training situation that they have to go through. There needs to be some sort of lesson framework. And so you also need to make sure that you are developing your characters' analytical thought processes and their critical thought processes. What do they think about themselves, about others, about the situations around them? How does that viewpoint change as the character develops over the story arc? And you also need to be having characters that are striving for improvement and even sometimes perfection, whether or not that is in their craft, in their relationships, or in their spirituality. They need to be searching for improvement. They're searching for ways to be more efficient or something of that kind. So searching for betterment. And when you are world building, you should be focusing on the southeastern direction of your setting. October 31st, you're back to a full moon. And so you get to still work on drafting and adding all the fun things to your story. But again, making sure that your characters have full lives. You have a wealth of experiences, events, and situations. Your relationships, whether or not it's antagonistic, platonic, familial, romantic, those are all built out. And once again, focusing on the southern direction. Okay, so those are the dates in October and the moon phases and sort of what kinds of things you can be writing under those particular moon phases. So if you feel like using this as a Preptober challenge or Preptober outlining thing with me, I'm excited to hear about it. Let me know what you're working on in the comments. Let me know what genre you're working on, or if you feel like some of these are going to be helpful to you. I think if I do all of these things in a month, I think I will be very close to ready to write a full-on new novel come November. Once again, my name is Jules. I'm the Dawdling writer, and I stream writing sprints Monday, Wednesday, Friday, 1 to 3 p.m. Eastern, and Sundays, 2 to 5 p.m. Eastern. And I do the occasional edited video. I don't have a schedule for those just yet, but I do them occasionally. So feel free to stop by and do some writing sprints with me or check on the occasional video that I post. So thank you very much, and I will see y'all next time. Bye!